cyber attacks. The agenda today is to review the evolution of security, evolving threats, the regulatory environment, how to prepare for a cyber attack, and risk management process. So the evolution of security, as you see, we went from guarding property and possessions and even our person in the early years of the evolution of humans to now we started getting into having to protect data. So how do we protect data? Some of the common tools that we used were lockable filing cabinets. We also added tools such as antivirus software, firewall, and anti-spam products. But now we've moved into the world of virtual selves and how to protect a virtual self where information is available publicly as well as your personal information has been shared with so many companies and organizations that you've done business with or been associated with. And a new set of tools is needed for the companies who are protecting your virtual selves. So what assets do you have at risk? I love asking companies what information, what assets do they have that they find valuable that other people would be interested in, whether it be trade secrets, whether it be customer information, credit card numbers. There's a variety of things that other people would be interested in obtaining. And they're responsible for keeping that information safe. If they don't, they could have some challenges. If that information was compromised, they could have financial damage, credibility damage, legal implications, as well as business process damages if they lost some of that important information. So let's talk for a minute about the evolving threats that companies need to deal with from a cybersecurity standpoint. First, I'd like to just say, who are cyber criminals? And these are people over in countries such as China and Japan, or China and Russia are the big ones, as well as some other countries. But they have full-time businesses where people simply go to work, and the whole time they're at work, they find ways to hack and breach and extract information and or financial gain from Western, European, and American companies. So with those types of people working every day just to try to take advantage of you, it's no surprise that estimates are 1 in 5 companies will be breached in 2017. So let's start with ransomware. It's the new tool of trade for the bad guys. And what ransomware does is it encrypts your information on your system and will not release it, will not give you the encryption key until you pay them a sum of money, usually to be paid in Bitcoin. There were 4,000 daily ransomware attacks in 2016. That's a 300% increase over 2015. The other thing is, if you do pay the ransom that they're requiring, there's no guarantee that you're going to get an encryption key or that you'll get the correct encryption key. So you still may lose all your data. In addition, a lot of the regulations, you still have to report that as a breach if there was a ransomware attack, HIPAA being one of those. Moving on, evolving malware threats. So malware is another very popular thing. There were 1 million new pieces of malware. So there are a lot of people creating malware. And you can think that the traditional security tools like firewalls, antivirus, can't even keep up with this mass amount of new code that's on a daily basis. There are 10 million cyber attacks per day. And that's as of 2012. Those are from the U.S. Department of Defense. The way that cybersecurity is evolving, that number's probably tripled or could be up 10 times that amount. And there are now black market websites that will provide quality testing for malware code. There's an example here. So if you do want to write malware code, you can have it quality tested. I want to talk about man-in-the-middle attacks for a minute. This is where anyone who's ever been nervous at a Starbucks or another coffee shop to use their network, it's because of man-in-the-middle attacks. For $89, an imposter can buy a device and get on one of those networks and collect traffic. Anybody who chooses their network, the imposter's network, they can track every keystroke, all the information that anyone enters. So if you go to your bank, enter your username and password while you're in there on that network, all that information will be collected and can be reused by that imposter to take advantage of you. If you have company information, same thing could happen. Phishing now is so common. These are emails where there is a payload of malware code or ransomware code put inside of an email, and it is sent out to people, and these are done in very realistic looking messages. I saw some really good IRS messages, messages from the IRS last tax season. The IRS does not send emails, so you know it wasn't them, but these are very well done. And if you were to click on them with the message, the compelling message that they put in there, clicking on them would lead you to either entering some personal data about yourself, or it could also be downloading malicious code, and you could then be hit with ransomware or another type of malicious type threat. And last is social engineering, and social engineering is where cyber criminals will research you with the knowledge, public knowledge that's available through social websites, as well as a variety of other different public places for information, and create a profile on a person that they're looking to take advantage of, and then use that information to get into all their systems, etc. They can find mother's maiden name. They can get a good idea what your passwords are going to be, because people have trends that they use in passwords. Just a lot of things they can do, and we've seen this. If they find out someone's a tax preparer and they're interested in doing tax fraud, they will go to your system, try to social engineer you so that they can get into your system and then use your system to file fraudulent tax returns, because it makes it even harder for them to catch those people, the cyber criminals. So this is a real busy slide, and it doesn't build, unfortunately, which it does when it's in PowerPoint, but I want to go over it. This is how to manage cybersecurity in your organization. So imagine the circle with endpoint security. This is your technical safeguards, and a lot of companies have an IT partner that's helping them with some of those technical safeguards and their endpoint security. And those are really important. But to have a full cybersecurity system, you also need to cover your physical safeguards, physical security, as well as your administrative safeguards and compliance. So putting all those together, you can see you really need what the triangle is, and you need a security partner who can help you manage all of your security needs. And you can also see the attacks that come in. There are attacks. Companies still try to get into your systems using your endpoint security, but the vast majority of attacks happening these days are coming through email attacks with ransomware. There are a lot of them are coming through employees, and the cyber criminals have found employees are the weak link, and they're trying to take advantage of those weaknesses, those vulnerabilities. And those are what you really need: a security partner and administrative safeguards to tie up a lot of those vulnerabilities. So what is a risk management process? This is based on the NIST guidelines. So I'm just going to briefly go over what this looks like. But with NIST, as well as all the regulations, they really look for a security life cycle to be put in place. And that life cycle is a process of assessing what your risks are. That could be through a risk analysis or other tools. Putting a plan together, a written information security plan would be a great example. Implement your plan, and this could be by a variety of different policies, procedures, as well as technical tools that are needed to be put into place. And then manage and monitor, as well as test all the things you put into place before coming right back to reassess your system because these threats are evolving so rapidly. So the first thing you need to do is know what your risks are. So what are your assets? What are the risks associated with protecting those assets? And then what would you do if those assets were compromised? And then build a mitigation plan. So this slide is the unfortunate slide that you would see if you were breached. This particular one is for ransomware, and it's a little dated because they're only giving you 12 hours to get your information back together. Today, the ransomware bad guys have found their biggest challenge is educating the people who are breached on how to pay their ransom quickly. So they like the ransom in Bitcoin, so they've actually set up customer service centers. So you can call into their call center and they can give you tips on how you can get Bitcoin, how you can buy them, how you can go to the exchanges, so that they are able to more quickly collect their ransoms and maybe or maybe not give you the ransom key. But I find it fascinating that the bad guys now have call centers so that they can help with their customer support. So a little detail here is that companies do not survive data breaches. 60% of all companies that are breached do not survive 6 months after that breach. And this is from Inc. magazine. And I already mentioned that the number of ransomware attacks increased 300% last year. So there's a lot of ransomware, there are a lot of breaches, and right now companies are not performing well after a breach. It's very hard on your business because people find out you were breached, and that whole level of trust, being a trusted advisor, starts to erode. So what are companies doing today for cybersecurity? Well, 80% of their budgets focus on outside threats, while 69% of network hacks are from internal sources through employees. Usually it could be an employee clicking on a wrong link. It could be someone taking advantage of your systems for a variety of different roles, etc. But installing new perimeter security, which many companies do, is no longer enough. So improperly configured permissions, user rights, operating system security parameters cause 70% of the most common security problems. So making sure that employees only have access to files that they need and not access to everything. That's how Target was compromised. They gave one of their vendors access to the entire company, and when the vendor was breached, they were able to breach Target and cause all kinds of damage to Target. And Target was much more sophisticated than about any company that I've ever seen, and they were still lacking in a lot of ways. And then most companies lack the ability to deprovision terminated employees in a complete and timely manner. One example, we have a client, and they have, and one of the members of their team has been with them for 3 years, and she still has access to the bank account of her previous company. So if she ever had the desire, she could go to the bank and withdraw funds right out of that old company's account, and that company would really have no way to stop her because they never provisioned her. And as this next slide shows, banks do not refund money lost in illicit transfers. So if she did go and take that money from her previous company, that previous company would have, there's nothing they could do outside of going to the authorities to get that money back. But if she was in another country and they extracted that money, there's really nothing you can do except not have the money anymore. Another little detail here is the National Small Business Association did some research and found out that the average small business data breach cost a company $32,000. So just imagine if your company is breached, not only the reputational damage and the disruption to work, etc., but the hard cost that you have from that breach is $32,000. So breaches are expensive. That's another reason that companies survive. There's some more data here. It says IBM on here, but it's from the Ponemon Institute, which is sponsored by IBM. That's the leading think tank on cybersecurity. And they just show by industry how much it costs to be breached. The average overall is $212. This is per record. So this is not the cost of a breach. This is the cost for each individual record that's lost. And you can tell if you do any healthcare work or have healthcare clients, the cost of a breach in healthcare is by far the highest. But financial, which includes tax preparers, is right behind. So what do you do? Okay, so now Jason, you've told us the threats. We know what's we know that it's a lot of bad stuff, but what can we do to be prepared? Well, the first thing is ask yourself these questions. I'm not going to go through all these, but I'll go through a few. Is that know your risk and have a plan in place to mitigate those risks. Have a person responsible for your cybersecurity. Those are the two most important. Some other ones are have a plan in place that if you are breached, because even the most prepared companies do get breached, that you have a plan in place for what you're going to do and how you're going to react. The first 72 hours after a breach are so important to the success or failure of the response plan. And if you have a plan in place and you're ready to go and put your plan in place, the damage will be minimal. But if you don't have that, it could be very, very painful. Another one here is make sure your staff is trained in cyber risk averse practices. I mentioned how employees are the weak links of your organization, but a lot of times employees don't know what they need to know to be cyber conscious and to make good cyber security decisions. And if we can train them and educate them, they'll be much better prepared, and that company will be in much better position to fight off cyber attacks. Another thing is look at your cybersecurity resources. So right here I talk about security resources, and right now 80% of security budgets are being spent on perimeter security, but as we've seen, only a small number of attacks come from the perimeter, whereas the internal security is where the majority of attacks are coming, but it's got the smallest investment. So finding a partner in security can really help you to put the resources where the attacks are coming from and prepare your organization. Know your regulations. So knowing the regulations that are out there that pertain to your company or even to your client's company is really important. The IRS tax guidelines came out in 2015, which really set the stage for what tax preparers need to do to prepare for cyber attacks. In that, they really pointed to the FTC safeguards rule as well as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act as the cornerstones of what those programs need. Just to add, all of these regulations are built on the NIST guidelines that we talked about earlier in this presentation. Another one is if you do any healthcare work and you have access to PHI, there's HIPAA, and HIPAA has a set of rules that you need to follow to make sure that you're follow the HIPAA rules when protecting data. And then last, there's also anyone who processes credit cards needs to follow the payment card industry, which is often called PCI security rules. And PCI has some yearly assessments. I'll go into some of that detail here in a moment. So GLBA enforcement rules. So who monitors GLBA? Well, there are 8 branches of the federal government that monitor the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and they're all able to levy penalties. And penalties can be up to $100,000 for each violation to the company. And there are also personal penalties. So officers and directors can be fined, as well as civil penalties that can go out in addition. So these penalties can add up very fast, and As of 2016, there are active audits taking place for security alone. PCI is the other one I wanted to talk about. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but I'm very open to a discussion if anyone's interested. But there are 4 levels of merchants. You can see the 4 levels. 3 of the 4 levels require an SAQ, so a self-assessment questionnaire, to be completed. CyberRisk Management helps companies with these quite frequently. If you are in level 1, then there are some additional things you need to complete. You can read about those here, but I would be more than happy to talk to you if your company fits into that category. Here's a few brief examples of some breaches. So not all breaches happen to targets of the world and the big companies. They're just the ones we hear about. But Wright Hotels, for example, they were social engineered, and a cyber criminal convinced a bookkeeper to send money to an offshore account on a monthly basis in what came to total over $1 million. Volunteer Voyages. This was a company that was put together to do missions, and they had a credit card stolen while they were on a mission in Peru, and this caused for the bank account to be drained, and they weren't able to reach anyone because they were on a mission in Peru. So they took all the money that Volunteer Voyages had in their accounts and caused a lot of problems for the people to get home, and to these are just people trying to help out, and their small little not-for-profit business was put out of business because of a cyber attack. So what can I do to prepare for a cyber attack? Some of the things you can do are, first, have assigned responsibility for security. It's so important to have someone responsible and to have that person have it in their job description that they are responsible for security. Understand your risks by completing a risk analysis. So understanding what risk you have is so important. And then you also need to implement a cyber risk management program. So put a program in place built on policies, procedures, building a risk-averse culture, and putting all the technical safeguards into place, but have a process that is currently reviewed, currently looked at and monitored, so that you're always mitigating the top risks that your organization has. And the top best practices are to build a cybersecurity framework that's led by executive management. So if executive management has this in place and is not handing this over to the IT department, that's when the best results are had. So addressing safeguards for compliance, these are some safeguards that I pulled from HIPAA, even though they're very similar to GLBA. But as you can see, technical safeguards, I think a lot of you are going to be familiar with. Your IT company addresses some of these, and if they aren't, then you should address these with your IT company. Physical safeguards, we talk about a lot of stuff, monitoring doors, etc., but also securing unattended computers. Little things like this. Sometimes people will have a computer on their network that they haven't used in years, and it can be full of vulnerabilities because it's so old. So taking a look at those types of items. Administrative safeguards, this is a lot of the meat of what's needed for a good compliant system. The annual risk analysis, security management process, security incident procedures. What happens if you do have an incident? What are your processes to do? Security training. All of these are just key parts. Policies, procedures, and best practices. So I've mentioned policies and procedures a few times, but they are really the key to having a good compliant system and a safe system. So I mentioned a few of those right here. The written information security plan, security incident response plan. These are all so important for a good system and need to be implemented at all your businesses. So I'm going to take just a couple minutes here as we're running out of time to talk about some things that can be implemented immediately. And one of the big things is we find a lot of businesses have passwords that are only 6 characters. And by moving that to 8-character passwords, As you can see here on this chart, it takes the amount of time for a breach from 8 days if someone's got software trying to breach your passwords using the software tools, to 2 centuries, so 20 years. So you can see just every time you can make that more complex, it makes it that much harder to breach. And I'd also recommend not using password or ABC123 as your passwords, because those are also very common and are the first ones that the bad guys try. So some other things you can do are restrict viewing access, so make sure that your computer does not face outside or people walking by. Make sure that it faces a wall or where people can't see. Make sure that when you leave your workstation, you hit Control-Alt-Delete so that you turn your screen with any PHI off. Don't put any private software on your work computer. And if you have a device that's lost or stolen, notify your supervisor immediately. A couple more here, some tips for email. The big thing here is don't open emails or attachments when you don't know the sender. And even if you know the sender, if you weren't expecting it, be careful when you open it. I had a client who was telling me that a company they did business with was breached, and they didn't know they were breached, but they sent out an email. And of the emails they sent out, I was aware of 10 of them that went out. 8 people clicked on the email, and it was obviously it was a virus that got in there. So 8 people clicked on this email, 8 out of 10, and they all became infected because of that, who didn't have the proper pieces in place. These were from someone new, so they're like, oh, I know this person, so I should be okay. But when I asked them about it later, they said, well, it was pretty fishy that you would click on that. So it wasn't something that they were expecting, but it was someone that they knew, and they fell for the trick. So what is a risk management process? So this is what cyber risk management does. We have a risk management process that in our engagements we like to implement with the clients we work with. And it is based on the process of assess, so the company's situation, analyze what that situation is, put together a mitigation plan, and then monitor and manage that process. So that is the whole cyber risk process. It's based on NIST, and an engagement with cyber risk management would net having this be part of your company's infrastructure and system. So what is cyber risk? Who is cyber risk management, and what do we do? We're a company that provides a full suite of data protection and risk management consulting services, cybersecurity and services for organizations subject to GLBA and other regulatory compliance. You can see some of those in the second box. We have over 3 decades of IT consulting experience, and our business has been doing only security consulting for over 4 years, almost 5 now. That's been the sole purpose of our business. We work with IT companies all the time. We are not an IT company. We don't replace what they do. We offer a variety of professional services, including risk analysis, policy and procedure, creation and updating. We do security awareness training, e-phishing test, business associate oversight, and risk management. And the business associate oversight is so important because we will manage your vendors for you to make sure that those vendors are working in compliance with the processes that you set up for your company to make sure your vendors are not your weak link. So what can I do before tax season? I know this is not the best time for tax preparers, being mid-January, but we are offering a special on cybersecurity and compliance training, and that's starting at $475. So please give me a call at 513-519-3533. We can talk about the details and at least start to mitigate some of those risks as we move into tax season, because that's a time of year when most people are interested in taking advantage of tax preparers for their financial gain. So here's my email address as well as my name. I appreciate you being a part of this webinar, and please contact me with any questions, concerns, or if you even want to just talk about cybersecurity. I would enjoy that. Thank you.